Morning, everyone. I am Joanna Pineda, and I'm joined by, oh my God, and we have a typo on that. I can't believe we missed it, Dave. Your name is misspelled. I am so sorry. We will fix it before it goes out. I'm totally embarrassed we missed it. But you're president of DelCor Technology Solutions, and we are really, really excited to be talking about the IT maturity model and how we can really help your organization grow and become more innovative. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so we'll get it sent out in the next 48 hours. And Russ is monitoring the Zoom meeting. So if you've got problems, kind of send a message. If you've got a question, go into Zoom and send a question, and he will let us know that there's a question. We'll also have time at the end. Although Dave and I think Dave, you and I would like to take questions during so that it's a little bit more interactive.
Yep.
And if after today's webinar you've got questions, you've got a comment, you want to give us some love, you want to give us some feedback, then please send us a comment on Facebook or Twitter, and you know, we'll take all the love we can, right, Dave?
Absolutely.
Right. So let me just introduce Matrix Group. For those of you who are not familiar with Matrix, I know a lot of you are clients here today, but we are a digital agency based here in Arlington, Virginia. We work almost exclusively with associations and nonprofits, and they hire us for really one or more of these problems: increase membership or stem some kind of decline, retain their members through compelling web and mobile offerings, reach new audiences with a clear brand. I don't know about you, Dave, but we find that there's a great many of our clients these days that are going through some kind of a transition. They're broadening their reach, they're narrowing their reach, they've got CEO transitions, and so they're kind of rethinking who their target audiences are. And then finally, what they're really trying to do is really kind of increase their staff productivity with a streamlined and integrated database that's integrated with a lot of their systems. So they really want their systems talking to each other. And we do all of this through these services. It really starts with developing the strategy, and then we help them create a beautiful website that integrates beautifully with their membership database. We have our own membership database, Matrix Max. We help them with their e-marketing campaigns that really span web, email, social, and often we are also doing custom development for them so that they can really kind of streamline and really optimize their different processes. So if you are looking to improve your member experiences through a new website, you're thinking about a new membership database, or you're just saying, my digital presence could use a boost, we hope you'll give us a call. Dave, why don't you tell us about DelCor?
So we are a roughly 35-year, 65 full-time staff organization that does focus pretty much exclusively also on associations and nonprofits. Just about all of our clients are 501c somethings, with very few. And we have an office up in Chicago, here in DC, and we basically do two things for associations and nonprofits, one being technology management consulting around all the things that have to do with that don't represent a product directly that you need to deal with because you have technology, right? So CIO services, project management, requirements analysis and solution selection, you know, all the policies and procedures, data governance planning, aligning strategy, and so on. And one of the things that ties all of that together is the IT maturity model we're going to talk about today for associations and nonprofits. And the other category of things we do really is in the traditional technology company in terms of being an MSP, managed service provider, a hosting company, and also providing end user support through a help desk and network operations center. That team also does projects along the lines of, especially recently, things like Office 365 migrations, maximizing the use of Microsoft Office 365 products like Teams and so on. So there's a lot to what an MSP does these days versus just tech support for end user support. And that's the two categories of things that we provide to the community.
And I want to give a shout out to DelCor, and this is actually one of the reasons why I asked Dave to do this webinar with me. We have a bunch of clients in common, And we just find that clients that are working with DelCor just perform better. They have plans, their tech makes sense, and there's a lot of thought that goes into the mix of technology and the use of technology. So it's really a pleasure when we're working with an organization that's also working with DelCor.
Thank you.
So today's agenda is really the Dave show. So DelCor, and Dave's going to talk about this, DelCor developed something called the IT Maturity Model, and this is in conjunction with the ASAE Foundation, and you'll talk about that later. So we're going to talk about what is it, you know, and how does it really help organizations become successful? Dave and I really meet with organizations on a regular basis that are struggling with their tech. It's not working, it sucks, it's too expensive, they don't understand it, it's old, it's constraining. So we're going to talk about this model as a framework for assessing your organization's tech, and then we're going to talk about associations that are really doing well with it. So without further ado, Dave, what is the IT Maturity Model?
Well, it's around 10 years old, and it's funny. We just did an office renovation, and I'm cleaning out stuff as we move before we renovate and move back in. And I picked up a day timer, if you remember them, and
oh yes,
it just happened to be open to a page from 2008, where it was the first time I think I sketched out the IT maturity model before it was even called that, and started thinking about it as, what do associations need to have in place, and how will they know whether or not their technology is helping them or hurting them? It was kind of that simple in the beginning. And what developed out of that is the framework, right? It's not a survey, it's not a true false quiz. It's a framework through which you can put together a technology plan that aligns with your strategy as an organization and with your business objectives as an organization. We'll kind of get into that. So one of the things that we had to do was break it, being technology, IT, down into what are our major areas of concern when we're dealing with clients, and what do we feel will help them elevate their IT game to the point where it's enabling them to do more, as opposed to either just being something that's there and running smoothly, or less than that, it's actually keeping them from doing it. So if you look at the 4 areas of the IT maturity model on the next slide, you'll see we came up with these 4 different labels for where somebody might be in their IT. And just real quickly, we picked these words carefully, but they're pretty self-explanatory, right? If you're in a restrictive state, it literally means the technology is keeping you from doing what it is you're trying to accomplish, whether you're talking at the organization level. Maybe when we talk about data, that would be a good example of it. At an organization level, it's keeping you from doing something, or you're talking at a user level, where I'm trying to accomplish a task, or I'm trying to learn the answer to a question, and the technology is literally keeping me from doing it. It's so hard. As opposed to we ratcheted up a level to the functional area, and that's when technology is working, but you feel like, okay, this is taking 10 steps for what should be 2, or this should be an automated procedure that kicks off when something triggers it, as opposed to I have to go in and manually set this up and keep it running from time to time. And if it is something that's in that first part of what I was talking about, that happens, that's 2 steps instead of 10, that's an automated sequence of events that for which there's some type of trigger, that brings it into an effective category. Not only does it do what it needs to do, but it's easy, it's providing what I needed to provide without much work from me. And that's fine, right? That's a good place to be if you have effective technology. But we decided on one more rung, being innovative. And when something's in the innovative category, it's strategic enabling. It's something that allows your organization to do something that's aligned with their mission, vision, and business objectives that they couldn't do unless you reach that level. And we can talk about some examples. So those are the 4 labels, right? And if you see the line across the top, one of the things we discovered is the IT conversations happening within an organization in the first 2 stages are organization focused. These are things we're struggling with. And in the last 2 levels of IT maturity, it's really focused, you're able to focus more on mission and vision and what you need to do for your business in terms of, you know, foundation support, getting people to conferences, providing a quality certification program, et cetera. So I'm going to, before I describe the 4 areas of IT, those are the 4 labels. That makes sense, right?
And yeah, Dave, it makes a lot of sense. And for those of you who haven't attended any of our webinars in the past, we like to make them kind of conversations between us. And so if you want to join the conversation, then go ahead and ask us questions. But I've got a couple questions for you, Dave. In your experience, do these labels, do they tend to apply to the entire organization, or do you find that within an organization, it's a mix where they might have a functional database, but maybe your marketing department and their use of, you know, certain technology is innovative? Or do you find that, you know, technology tends to cluster because they're also tied together?
Yeah, yeah, thanks. It's really individual, organization by organization. You might have in the 4, there are 4 different areas we'll talk about. You might have restrictive, effective, effective. In the 4 different areas would have in 4 different places in the organization. So it's not clumped. It's, hey, infrastructure, one of the 4 areas, is being dealt with by a team that has a lot going for it and is in the effective stage, okay, right? But our data is a nightmare and it's restricting us from doing stuff. So that's okay. I mean, okay, in terms of now we know, and now we start planning how we move each one up to its next level, it being the area of focus.
Okay. And I guess another thing, Dave, I would imagine that organizations go through these different stages over time. Something that starts out being innovative, unless it's really, you know, you devote time and energy into the care and feeding of that tech, it might turn restrictive in a few years. So this becomes a cycle.
And that's part of one of the 4 areas is management and governance. And in a truly mature organization, the management and governance piece includes that, exactly what you're talking about, which is the periodic, appropriate for the organization, the periodic review of where we stand in those 4 areas.
So Dave, you were going to talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what you just described doesn't happen, yeah.
So you were going to talk about the four areas. Why don't you tell us about those?
So we broke it down into 4 areas, and one of them being infrastructure. So that has changed. Think about 10 years ago, right? I used to be able to say anything that you plug in or is lighting your server room with a green glow, you know, things that are connected to a cable in some way. So infrastructure used to be a very local term, but it's changed, and the model and the framework support this change to including your cloud-based infrastructure pieces, or you know, infrastructure that's something that's part of like your multi-factor authentication, et cetera. So we still consider infrastructure to be that underlying set of train tracks on which the trains must run, right? And the trains themselves. It's all the pieces of your technology. So that's one area.
So Dave, would your laptops be part of infrastructure? Yep. Or is it more, okay, so it's your laptops, it's your servers, it's your file servers, it's your
firewalls,
your email systems, it's all of those things.
Right, your virtual servers, you're hosting somewhere, all those pieces.
And what you're telling us is that in the past, we used to have a server room where all of that stuff was housed, but really now we've moved stuff into the cloud. Doesn't mean it's innovative, but we've moved it into the cloud. And now we've got Office 365, we've got Hosted Exchange, we've got, you know, Google Drive, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, so we've got infrastructure, and what's next?
Data, the collection and use of data. And that takes a pretty broad perspective, right? Because most of us think immediately of our association management system or our CRM, but there's a lot more data than that in the organization. So it's as broad as including data that you're collecting in other systems, like your development system. You know, if you have a foundation or a development office, what data is going in there. In your registration systems, you're collecting data. So it's the data within the organization is another quadrant, and its use. So we'll talk about that. A third area is your the technology and use of your online presence, which is obviously very near and dear to Matrix's core mission, and that includes social, mobile, and web. And I'll tell you, when I first put this model out, some of my CIO friends came along and said, "What is that doing in your model? Like, what does that have to do with me as a CIO?" Right? Because two things. One, 10 years ago, technology departments owned the online piece well beyond their stake in ownership today. They had the content management folks. They had not only the content management systems and integrations in their ownership portfolio, but and they also had, they were posting content and had content editors in the technology department. So we felt like if an association is truly going to be mature, IT does have a role, no matter what, back then different, but still a role in their online presence, social, mobile, and web. So that's, we've defended it and kept it in the model.
I actually agree with you. I feel like in really the most progressive, high-performing organizations, IT has a role to play in all that because there's data that's coming into those systems. There's software that needs to be upgraded, and IT needs to, and there's software and data and systems and processes that need to be protected. And there's kind of workflow, and there's also things like authentication that ultimately IT has to be involved with. So it totally makes sense. Now, they may not be leading the charge, but they should be supporting the charge. Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that's part of that fourth quadrant. Even the IT management and governance piece. One of the things that if you're at the high end of maturity, your IT group sees themselves. You just hit it right on the head. They see themselves as a partner with the business units that have things like online digital assets and online digital properties in social and mobile that they need to support what the group is trying to accomplish in marketing or communications or advocacy with their online efforts. But what you just said is they shouldn't be leading that charge. They should be partnering with those groups and understanding how they can support what they're doing from what you're trying to accomplish perspective.
And what's the fourth category?
Well, that last one is the IT management and governance piece.
Yes, okay.
So everything from staffing and structures, contract management, licensing management, policies and procedures, professional development for IT skills throughout the entire organization. I mentioned like cybersecurity training and awareness, things that you have to do to manage the IT and keep the organization healthy that are about management and governance versus, decision-making criteria, budgeting, all those pieces that have to be in place.
And Dave, what I have found is in the same way that IT now is involved with things that maybe in the past were communications and marketing, like website, social, etc. What we're finding is that the rest of the organization is much more involved with IT because everybody needs cybersecurity training.
Right.
So it's really this melding of these different responsibilities. Dave, how do organizations use these different levels to plan, for example? It sounds like you're really giving them good language to have kind of technology to aspire to. So how do they use that? Is this part of your strategic planning? Do you share this with your board? How does that work?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is that two things. One is that, this is a framework that's specific for associations and nonprofits. So what we do is we collect about 60 different data points across the 4 areas so that we can say, in this framework, we're evaluating you as functional or effective or restrictive, and here's why. And then that's what we use it for, so that the real valuable part can become, here's our understanding of where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish as an organization and what your metrics are for your business objectives. These are the things you need to have in place to achieve the next level for these 4 categories. So that's how they use it. It's the real value in having a framework, whether it's ours or anyone else's, is not only saying this is where we are today, but understanding through these conversations, which are probably the most valuable part of the process, right? Through the conversations of determining and clarifying where you're going in the future, understanding what the path is for each level and each category of technology, so that at the end you have this. You know, the record might be in the 70s. We've had organizations that have 7 things on their plate, all the way to up in the 70s of things we think they need to do, right? Wow. And that's hugely overwhelming, right?
Right.
So what they do with it, what we want them to do with it is, you know, we take our crack at prioritizing things, but what we really want them to do with it is to sit and, since they live in their organization, and make sure that our prioritization is right or close, and then tweak it. And the critical thing is, okay, out of these 34 things, these are the 5 that fit within our, you know, financial, staffing, and cultural constraints of the organization that we can accomplish in the next year.
Yeah.
And then these are the 5 in the wings that follow that, or 3, or whatever it turns out to be. That's what they do with it. And then they share that with their board, if that's the type of board they have. Certainly the whole leadership team is on the same page of understanding, given our constraints, and I'm not using that as a disparaging or negative word, but given the reality of our limitations, really, in different ways, these are the things we can do. And unless somebody gives us more resources, or we change our or something, we're all on the same page now of what IT has in front of it.
Right. Terrific. Well, let's talk a little bit about this study that you all did that really supports the IT maturity model.
Great. So this is, you know, the maturity model itself, the framework is, like I said, around 11 years old now. Probably 8 years into it, ASAE got involved and said, what can we do with this? This is interesting. So we talked to them and we said, listen, this is a framework. And this was a really educational event for me, the whole process, because it's a framework. And then they said, let us do a research project around this. So they brought in Rockledge Research, the foundation, and they took our framework and turned it into a research tool, which is different, right? Repeatable questions, you know, data points that can be analyzed, as opposed to ours is kind of, this is what we learned, this is what we feel after doing this hundreds of times. So this tech success for associations is a result of turning our framework into a research product that ASAE put out there through the foundation. This study, it's probably about 10, 12 pages of the results of it, is available through ASAE. You can get it through their, you know, website, or if you want, I can send whoever a copy of it. But it really gives kind of we had hundreds of organizations participate in a survey. We did deep dive interviews with 10 organizations. Here's what we think the state of technology in the association community is, based on the framework of the IT maturity model. That's what that study is. And
what are some neat things that you found from the study? Surprising things.
Surprising was, well, one thing is, I think that, and like I said, I learned a lot working with ASAE and this research firm, and one of the things was how differently researchers think than consultants think, and that's good. But one of the things that I was saying, hey, you know, this is the average of results of our findings and what we think the top recommendations are, most common ones, and so on. And they said, yeah, but don't forget you have a bias. Not everyone. People come to you because they're probably experiencing some kind of symptom that they don't feel like their technology is where it should be. So you have a data set that's already biased towards a lower level of maturity. Interesting.
So step back a little bit. So what they found in the tech study was that more organizations rated themselves in the effective to innovative than your clients.
Right, exactly. And that's right. That's exactly where I was headed with, so I found it surprising when they did the study how highly the organizations rated themselves. But it made sense when I reflected back on the fact that they said, well, don't forget your bias in your data set is people with problems coming to you. Right.
Right, okay.
All right, that makes sense.
So this is something that you recommend that everybody read, and we'll send a link out, and everybody can get it.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. It's not about our maturity model, so to speak. It's about taking the framework that we have in these 4 areas and a research firm going out and looking at the community. And part 2 of it is really interesting too, is that there was a tech readiness assessment, which is how ready are your members, how ready in general are association members for technology, to answer that question of, do we lead or do we lag? Do we force multi-factor, or do we force something on the members that we don't think they're quote unquote ready for? Or is it they're actually ready and we don't know it? So the tech readiness part is part of that study as well. That would probably be interesting to most associations because it's about membership.
But if you take a look at this slide, Dave, you have 67% of the organizations rating themselves as marginally effective on infrastructure. And you guys split that up into marginally and highly effective. That still leaves a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, and that was part of what it was interesting. Like you said earlier, is look, no one's in the restrictive state.
Right.
And I can't tell you the last time we did one of these where at least one of the 4 areas wasn't restrictive.
Oh man, Dave, I tell you, I'm going to have to agree with you. We had a lot of people coming to us, and they've got really restrictive situations where they're just unhappy. They're pissed off. They hate their CMS. They hate their database. Like they're just ready to, smolder the whole thing, torch it. So, all right. Right. So we're talking about technology. Let's talk a little bit about where associations struggle, and you and I have some strong feelings about this. So in their tech, you say number 1 is user experience, and I'm going to agree with you, but tell me why you think that.
Well, a couple of things. It's one of those pieces, like you just said, okay, so you talk to them and they're angry, right? And they're disappointed in their IT or their use of IT. So one of the places that really affects everyone and manifests itself is the user experience, right? Trying to register for an event, trying to recover your password, trying to sign up as a new member, and you get foiled during the process by some bizarre path that you're going down. That's something I feel like the association community as a whole doesn't pay enough attention to. They trade off or feel that perhaps the value of what someone's getting exceeds the pain of trying to get to it. So they're okay without focusing on the user experience piece as much as they should.
I agree with you. I also find that when organizations are looking, say, for new AMS, they are highly focused on what I call staff-side functionality, and I think they are much less focused on member functionality. But I think these days, the focus should be flipped, because these AMS systems have had a long time to really refine their back-office functionality. And you can train people, right? So you've got 100 people, you got 5 people, you got 200 people. You can train them all in the quirkiness of the system, but you cannot train your 45,000 members in advance how to register for a meeting or how to access, specific resources. So I think you got to lead with the user experience on the customer side these days.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I mean, Jared Spool does a user interface conference up in Boston, right? Every year. 14, 16 years ago, I started going to that because I thought it was, he's a great speaker and runs a good shop, and it was just really interesting. Everything's focused on Land's End and Amazon and, you know, Ford and so on at this conference. And I don't think I ran into an association person for the first 7 or 8 years of going to it. Until then you started to get AARP and, you know, AMA and the big brand, large organizations. And it just kind of was a little data point of, where is this conversation in our community?
Yeah. So number 2, you say integrations. I think I would agree with you. But what does this mean to you?
The lack of integrations is being a solution to kind of the next bullet point, the data governance issues, right? So we have 5 different systems. We have a registration system. We have an email campaign system. We have a membership system. We have a content management system, et cetera. Push all these together and make them one bullet point. You know, how do the integrations support the data governance and the last bullet point, the analytics that the organization needs, and how do they support a better user experience, right? Those are all intertwined at this point.
Yep, absolutely. And you have data flows between all these systems, and you've got user experience as people are traversing different systems. I mean, a common one that we find organizations struggle with is when you go from the website to the AMS to say register for a course, and then you get bopped over to the LMS. And you're traversing 3 systems, and how do you make that seamless, and how do you make it so that I'm not having to re-enter data, and how do I make it so that it's not a disorienting experience, and how do you make it so that it's easy for me to come back? And then related to data, how do you track all that so that you know that it's effective?
Right. And I'll tell you one quick anecdote. One organization was struggling with these various things: analytics, data governance, integrations, and user experience. And it was brought to bear because some part of the group went to, this is a big organization, multi-hundred staff. They do an $80 million annual conference. Some of the group went to Dreamforce, Salesforce's annual meeting. And I've been to Dreamforce. You come back, you're all Kool-Aided up, you love it, you can't wait. Salesforce will solve every problem. It's great. And that's what they came back. And it was pitchforks and torches outside of IT to dump the AMS because it was evil, right?
Right.
We got to the root of it with them being a data governance issue because they had legitimate functionality that Salesforce supports that they required that the AMS really didn't support, because they had a legitimate sales team that did prospecting and nurturing campaigns and inbound lead management and so on. The solution was understanding your data set, understanding who owns which parts of the data set, and then providing integrations that allow folks to manage their data in their way, but give others access to the data that they need to complete their job without having to recreate that data set. It was a large, long, and I mean multi-month, not 3 days, process for the organization just to even understand their data, right, to get these integrations right. So you have to have the stamina to get through that, though. And that goes back to the maturity model. That's part of the data quadrant's higher levels of maturity. If you don't have a data governance plan and clean data and trustworthy data, why would you bother with analytics, right?
Yes, that's true. And we hear this a lot. We don't trust our data. And I think, oh, all right, well, let's fix it. If you don't trust the data, then what do we have to do so that you trust the data? And what do we have to do so that the data stays clean? Russ, we've got a question.
Yeah.
What's the question? Go ahead and read it.
The question is from Chris. The question is, I'm wondering if you've looked at association staff skill set in relation to technology solutions. I find there's a lot of value that we can't leverage because some people can't grasp how to use even simple solutions. How much of that problem is a technology problem?
Oh, great. I love that question because part of that management and governance quadrant includes the professional development piece. So in a mature organization, this is awesome because it's not an IT problem, right? It's almost an HR issue to deal with in terms of we're bringing people onto the team. The people on the team have to have certain skill sets in order to use the technology that they need to use to get their job done, so to speak, and contribute to the organization. There needs to be, from an HR perspective, I think we need to partner with HR as the IT folks and say, what's our plan for doing a skills assessment? And then a professional development plan to fill that gap between what they need to be able to do and what they can do. Because typically, we're not going to hire someone because they know how to do a pivot table, right? But we might hire someone who has all the skills we need, but can't do a pivot table. We can train them on that. But if no one's assessing that gap and how to fill it for the 12 things they don't know how to do yet, but they're the right person, then it's going to fail. And in a mature organization, HR is part of that solution, not just IT. I hope that answers.
I think you're absolutely right. So it's not an IT problem. But for me, it goes to ongoing IT management and training. If you're not investing in professional development and training so that your staff, for example, really understand the systems that they have and its capabilities and know how to use them effectively, you're going to have the most amazing technology perhaps that nobody's using. So then you'll have restrictive technology because no one's using it, and they're like, you know, managing and creating new databases. And you go down this spiral.
Right. Yeah, one of the first things you want to do in any of these types of assessments is find out how strong the HR function is in the organization.
Oh, interesting.
Because so much of this relies on skill sets, to Chris's question, and it's not, it's in our opinion, it's no longer, it used to be that IT did IT training, right? We're talking 12, 15 years ago.
Right.
That's not the role that IT plays any longer in terms of doing the training itself. IT can partner with HR and help them understand the skills necessary and find an appropriate solution to the professional development path. But if that's not being done, what you just said, Joanna, is exactly what happens, right? It's a downward spiral to this way of doing it's easier, so I'm going to keep it in Excel because I know Excel, versus understanding how to pull that report out of a database.
Right. I didn't even know the AMS did that. I didn't know the LMS did that. You know, and then the last thing is, you know, I think this one's obvious. It's, you know, cybersecurity associations are struggling with that. And Dave, I think what we find is that organizations don't realize that cybersecurity is kind of an organization-wide responsibility from the CEO down to the person opening, you know, the mail and, you know, every email, and then kind of investing in it.
And that's, you know, investing in cybersecurity?
Yeah, like making sure that there's budget behind training.
Right, okay.
And keeping your system secure. I mean, we hear from people, oh, we just don't have that kind of money. But, you know, as my CTO says, you know, like, how much would it suck if you had to say to all of your members, your data was just breached?
Yeah, it wouldn't be good.
It wouldn't be good. So I think cyber is
not a good thing. Yeah,
exactly. So Dave, was there another question, Russ? Oh, okay. So let's talk about how do you apply the model to your digital presence, and you know, without going into all of the framework, you know, we talked about how do you get started. So talk to us about how you would inventory your digital presence so that you can figure out, like, how do you even start to assess it?
You know, and this is definitely in your wheelhouse, right, of how to elevate somebody's digital presence game. That's what I mean, you talked earlier about, that's what we experience when working with you with a common client is it's not about what do you want the website to look like, right, so that you'll be happy with it in the end, client. It's what does the website need to look like to surface your value proposition, and what does it need to do so your members see your value and interact and engage with your value as an organization. So to answer your question, you know, when we're helping kind of on the precursor part of where are we in our digital online presence game, so to speak, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's our goal of the online properties, social, mobile, and web. And more importantly, what do we know about, hopefully a lot, the people who's using its goals, so that we can align our content, our user experience, our systems with them in a way that allows them to complete their goals. So it's that inventory piece of both goals for the organization, selfish goals we call them, which are great, as well as constituent goals, so we know what the value is, and then literally inventorying all of your online properties. I'm not exaggerating. We worked with one group up in Chicago. We found over 40 online properties by going to all the different business units, and they had no idea they had this many. And we did a slide during our presentation of all the different home pages that looked very dissimilar from each other. That this group, it's a big group, a big brand name association up there. They couldn't wrap their head around that somehow they had developed all these online properties and nobody had an inventory of all of them. So hopefully you don't have that situation, but it's out there. Well,
we actually find that when we started engagement, we have a design study process where we kind of say, look, let's just identify all of the tools. Surprisingly, with some organizations, it takes a while to actually do it. They'll say, ooh, and we think, oh yeah, we've got this grant-funded thing that got funded a couple years ago, and we got to find that URL. And oh yeah, we've got this community here, and we've got a LinkedIn group, and I think we have a Facebook group, and we got a bunch of microsites for a conference. And yeah, we keep them 10 years. I mean, like, what we say is inventory it, and then, going back to your point about being strategic with this, instead of focusing on the specific technology, really say, what's the user experience? We call them the member journeys. What are the member journeys that you want to have? Be intentional about them, and then say, what do these journeys look like? And then which systems do they traverse? What tools are we going to use to make these journeys amazing? Now, how do we bring them all up to speed, and how do we tie them together? And we find that that's such a useful model for thinking about how to make them better, because it's in support of improving whatever journey it is. So you and I talked earlier about the meeting journey, right? How do you make the whole process of learning about a meeting, registering for a meeting, attending a meeting, and then continuing the learning after a meeting and implementing some of the things that you've learned at a meeting? What kind of experience should that look, what should that experience look like? And how do we make all these tools work in support of that kind of a journey? I think what it does is it makes you think not just about the website, but it makes you think about everything from the paid search to the emails, to the landing pages, to the AMS reg process, to the follow-up after a meeting that makes it amazing.
And that's right, that's the mature organization.
Yes.
I got a link. I got a registration link through a tweet or through an email on my phone, and I click on it and I get a mobile appropriate registration page.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't always happen. Like you said, the journey.
It's the journey, right? I'm working with a couple of organizations right now that are really struggling. They're saying, we don't have the kind of attendance that we want, let's redo the website. And I say, I think we got to look broader. It's often not just the website. And sometimes we're not getting the attendees that we want, so we got to email more. It must be the email. And I say, well, it might be the emails, but it could be the reg form. So let's take a look at your analytics. Let's do a usability study of your AMS, of your registration system through your AMS. Let's look at it through the lens of a person who has a username, the person who doesn't have a username, the person who's a member has a username, the person who's not a member doesn't have a username. How difficult or how easy is it to do it? And along the way, what are you enticing me with so that I complete the journey?
Yeah, that's great.
So Dave, when this all works, it's pretty amazing what the results are, right?
It's progress, absolutely.
And I'm interested in this when you say this is what success looks like: a communicated plan, alignment across the organization, trust, leadership, measurable results. Trust is the thing that I would love for you to comment on.
So, and when you put the slide deck together and had the title, right? What does success look like? And I started filling some bullet points in, and I thought to myself, really, what it comes down to is these all kind of meld together. That there is a plan that everyone understands and agrees with, and has assigned leaders and owners of parts of the plan that everyone trusts. Everyone knows why we're doing what we're doing, from staff, leadership, volunteer or elected leadership perspectives. They get it. And it's not, and this is a sign of a mature organization too. I mean, part of the governance and management piece is communication of what the IT strategy is, so that it's not old school control by hoarding knowledge, right? Which was part of our dark history as IT people, right? We knew how to do things no one else knew how to do. So it's like, hey, I know how to do that. I'll tell you when I can get to it, type of thing. Versus now it's, hey, you've got to partner with everyone, and you got to trust each other that you're all looking out for that same end goal. So that's, to me, the kernel of what success looks like. We're all on the same page. We all trust the plan. We're communicating, and we're working as partners, as opposed to the secret bunker in the basement where all the IT stuff really happens, knows what's going on, but no one else does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you know what I'm thinking? When all of this comes together, you trust your leadership to take you in the right direction. You trust that your systems will work. You trust that the data is good, right? So it's all kind of goodness coming out of that. And this doesn't happen without leadership. And it sounds like you really need leadership at all levels. And later on, I'll be talking about how, case study of a client where really at the highest levels, the leadership was engaged, and it became obvious to the staff that, hey, this is important, we should pay attention. This is important, that we got to actually, really get this done. And we're going to be measured by it.
Yeah.
So Dave, you're going to talk about some associations that are getting it right. I'm going to tell the story of one client, and then I know you've got some stories. So I'm going to share with you the story of the Mechanical Contractors Association of America, and I got the permission to tell their story. When we started working with them about three and a half years ago, I remember the phone call. It was the CEO, John Gentili, who called and said, hey, you work with some other organizations in my space. Can you come meet with me? And he was beyond frustrated. He said, none of my tech is working. My staff is unhappy. We don't trust the data in our system. People are not using the online registration process. They call us, and I've got a staff person who has to do all of this manually, or they fax in the registrations. My website is not working. It is difficult to manage. It is ugly. People don't visit it, and I just don't even know why we should have it. We've got a higher logic community that nobody uses. I need help, and I've got these sub-organizations. MCAA is a big organization, and within it there are these, I guess they're kind of like special interest groups, the Mechanical Service Contractors Association, the Plumbing Contractors of America, and the Pipe Welding Board, National Council on Pipe Welding Board. And so they said, can you help? And so over the course of several years, really, we worked on a big plan to kind of get their technology to be more high performing and really in service of their mission. So I wanted to show you, this is what their homepage used to look like. The navigation is what I would call functional navigation, and it was kind of weird. It was like about, bookstore, education, register. So it was like, do you go here if you want to register for a meeting? Do you go to education if you want to find a meeting? And then you've got passwords. Like, it wasn't clear what that was. People got really confused. But you also had the member login. It was not visually interesting. And if you clicked on the resource spotlight, and it happened to be a resource in the store, you often got stuck in a loop. So here was their about page, which I tell my clients is one of the most important pages on your website, because for the person who's unconverted, meaning they don't know who you are, and up to 80% of traffic on the website comes through Google. So there's a good chance that these are people who don't know you. And then when they click on the about, is this what they're and this is what they see. What's that going to, you know, tell them about you? Here was their online bookstore, which had their collection of free resources to members, hardly used, amazing resources. They have something called management methods, where basically they have developed all of these chapters that cover everything you need to run a successful mechanical contracting business, not being used at all. And then finally, they had something called Smart Solutions Newsletter, which was a newsletter that was really highlighting kind of, you know, case studies of contractors and supplier members, you know, doing really new and interesting things and being really innovative. So over the course of a few years, we kind of, you know, worked with them to figure out what the priorities are. In the process, ended up working with them and their IMAS reseller to put in RISE. Worked very closely with the reseller so that it became this really seamless experience as you went from the website to their AMS and, you know, and accessing resources, etc. So this is the website as it looks today. See here, we've got news. We've got upcoming events, and the different types of blues tell you which organization is sponsoring it. We've got featured events, and we've got the featured resources, and I'll tell you in a second about that. We also have, let me close down some of this, but it's easier to get to. This is what their convention site looked like this year. I was just telling Russ that they had Imagine Dragons at their conference, and they didn't invite me, and I can't believe that they did that. So their annual convention didn't really used to have a presence, but now it's got a big presence. It's the single most important event of the year, brings together the most members, brings in a lot of revenue for them. So that's their conference. They have now a presence for their kind of the sub-organizations that they have, and they're really leveraging the tech that's powering MCAA. And then finally, one of the things that's so neat here is their resource center. We pulled all of the resources that were previously in the IMAS store. They were all free, and their CEO said, Joanna, we're just not getting the downloads that we want. They're all free resources. Why do they need to be in the shopping cart? And we said, well, what kind of tracking do you want? So what we did is we put it into a different type of resource center where all the newest stuff gets posted to the resource center. You can also, let me go to the resource center. Here it is, all the resources that get posted, their best practices, their reports, their videos, etc. And you can also view them by organization or by topic, or you can do a search. What we realized was that the resources, putting them into this format and making it easier to download really encouraged the downloads. But what we also realized through analytics and looking at their email was that when they really want to promote something, they got to put it in their newsletter and they've got to pitch it a certain way. So it became this integrated effort where they say, if we really want to, if we want to pitch, for example, or really want to promote the downloads of this management methods bulletin on a specific topic, scheduling best practices, then it's got to be on the homepage, it's got to be in the resource center, it's got to be in the email, and it's got to be, you know, promoted elsewhere. And now they're getting the downloads that they want. By the way, they also get from us analytics on a regular basis, and they get our help to really interpret the analytics, and then we have discussions to say, well, what does this mean? So let me go back. So I'm super proud of this organization, and here are some of the things that they're doing that I think are really contributing to their success. Number one is that their leadership is super engaged. Their CEO, John Gentili, doesn't attend every meeting, certainly, but you know, several times a year, he'll actually attend the meetings with us and really talk to us about the user experience or his vision for how to get this right. And one of the things that he really said to us from the very beginning was, I want my members to only have to log in once, and I don't want them to have to keep logging in again. So of course that produced a lot of angst among the IT folks, but what we were able to do working with our IMAS reseller was Dave, what we did is we split the login cookie so that when you log in for the first time, we have a very long session on the website, but we have a shorter session on the IMAS side so that you can continue to access the resources. But if you if you have to register for a meeting, you have to log in again. Since most of their interactions with MCAA digitally are really to access the resources, they don't have to keep doing it. Number two is really the focus on the user experience, and really kind of at every level, it was, how do we design this so that as they go from this point to this point to this point, it's a really great experience. Number three, they budget for maintenance, enhancements, and training. And I'm not saying that they spend a lot of money every quarter or even spend a lot of money every year, but they just make sure that on a regular basis, they're budgeting for this. So every time that they have new staff, they'll say, we have new staff, please come in and do the training. And that just means that they're not forgetting how to use the tools that we've got, and the frustration, doesn't build up because people don't know how to use the tools. They've got a medium-term plan, not a long-term plan, and I actually agree with that, because long-term plan, I think digitally, it's going to change anyway, so you might as well have a medium-term plan with, with even some flexibility there. And then finally, they do a yearly tech vendor summit, which, Dave, I know you really support, where what they do is they bring together all of their different partners, they bring together the stakeholders, the most important stakeholders within the organization, and the leadership says, here are the priorities that we have, and here are the partners that we're relying on to make this happen. Get introduced to each other, please work well together, know all of the staff members that you need to work with, and let's make some great things happen. And what I find is, we're not struggling to figure out who's working on their community. We're not struggling to figure out, who we need to talk to, on the IMA side, and that just works so well. Again, because we all kind of are working towards the same goals that the CEO has really laid out. Dave, you've got some examples that you wanted to share.
Well, I don't have as much, and I know we're getting tight on time.
Sorry.
Right. So what I was going to offer is, one thing that might be valuable to the folks listening is, we took the last 2 years of our assessments, and one of our team members, one of our outsourced CIO guys, Mike Guerreri, kind of looked at all of our different assessments, and he came up with the most common the top five most common recommendations in each quadrant. So it's in its final format. It's going to be drafted, or it's going to be formatted and ready for posting. I'd be happy to share that with anyone who'd be interested in seeing it, because I think it speaks to not so much are you getting it right, but if you look at this and say, well, none of those really apply to us, then you're getting it right. Or you might pick 2 or 3 things out of this list that really do apply to you and figure out what you're going to do about them. So maybe that's a good follow-up and follow-up piece for folks, association folks listening to, get a copy of and look at.
I love it, Dave. That's very generous of you. Thank you. So we always end our webinars with an action plan, because we've spent a lot of time talking about this framework, and it might seem overwhelming. So when we were developing this webinar, I said to Dave, how does an organization get started if they're not accustomed to maybe doing this type of assessment or planning? And this is what we came up with. So Dave, you said first just inventory your IT projects, right?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, I might, if I were you, right, I might download the white paper on the IT maturity model from our website, just so you have a framework, right? I might also download or get a copy of that IT success for associations that the foundation did, ASA Foundation did. So it's this little background material to read ahead of time. What you'll find coming out of that is really what you need to do is, and when we do this as a first step, it's almost like the website comment I made earlier. Some organizations have no idea that they have 27 IT dependent or related projects going on throughout the organization until somebody goes to each business unit and finds out who you're partnering with, what are you doing? Oh, you have Informs. Oh, this group over here has Real Magnet. Oh, this group over here has another email tool. They're using Marketo over here. They're using HubSpot over there, right? So you find out all these platforms and projects as the first step. So then from there, you can really figure out, now we know what's going on and who owns them, which is a whole separate conversation. We need another hour for that, right? And then we need to figure out how much do we know where we're headed here. Let's fill those roles and gaps in of where we're headed as an organization and what we're trying to accomplish. And how does that inventory of projects align with those goals and vision and mission that we have? where are things that aren't connected to anything? Why are we doing them? Maybe there's a really good reason, but let's get on the same page with it. And where are the things that we're trying to do that don't have any lines drawn to them? So we have no initiatives to support that goal of ours as an organization. What do we need to do to support that further? So these are just the steps to get you on that path of what's the plan, what's that we all trust and understand and communicate with each other and are going to execute.
And I think one thing that you know, my advice to you is, as you're looking at all of your IT projects, one of the things that I do with my team is, because there's always way more projects than we really have the capacity to handle in any given quarter. So what we do is we take a look at the list, and then I give them permission to either eliminate completely or not focus on a specific project or two, so that then they can focus on the things that are important. And so that's up, you know, from the top leadership. This is important, I get it, but we will not have the capacity to focus on it, so don't focus on it. You're not going to get to it anyway, so you might as well not fret about it.
Yeah, it's really important to give yourselves permission not to do everything, even though something might seem really important and a high priority doesn't mean you can do it.
Right. And then I think what happens is, if you've got this plan and you say, look, this quarter, this is what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on figuring out how we can eliminate the double, triple, and quadruple data entry. That's what you focus on at the end of the quarter. You see if you've made that progress. You really celebrate that success to the rest of the organization. And I think that builds a lot of momentum, and that builds a lot of trust in the process. And now they're ready to put in the hard work to make the kind of the next process better, to take something to the next level. So Dave, we ran out of time to do the polls. I don't know if people are interested, but we had some questions that we thought might be fun to go through. Do we want to do the polls, or we just want to break? I guess we should break.
Yeah, we're a little 8 minutes over, and being, you know, kind of respectful of people's time. Is that something that can be posted? Or
Yes, that's a great idea. So we had some questions. We just ran out of time. There's so much that we were trying to cover, you know, in this 1-hour webinar. So we had, I think, 6 or 7 questions. What we'll do is we'll put together a survey. We'll send it out to you all, as well as the links to the different resources. And then once we get the results back, we'll send it to you all. And we really look forward to, you know, having a conversation with you all about your IT maturity, and hopefully you can kind of benchmark where you are and figure out the path forward. So Dave, I want to thank you for sharing all of this with us. I know I've learned a lot from it, and you know, I think that that you're really doing amazing work in helping organizations becoming, you know, more high performing, and as I like to say, really enabling them to change the world and accomplish their missions.
Well, thank you, and thank you for spending the time on this today and having me be part of your always informative webinar series.
All right, so remember, give us some feedback on social. You know, give us some feedback, and we'll be sending you lots of follow-up. Everyone have a terrific day. Thank you. Bye.